I'm Vedran Mimica. I'm a Croatian-born Dutch educator and now professor at IIT College of Architecture in Chicago. I lived in Yugoslavia and when I was very young, my mother decided that it would be good if I would visit some of her friends in Paris. And I went as 18-year-old to visit my mother's friends in Paris, and then I understood this is incredible city, incredible architecture, incredibly different than Zagreb, where I grew up. And that maybe bring me a little bit more to, studying urban issue, history of architecture, and then deciding to enter into the School of Architecture in Zagreb in 1973. We used to almost study in a city in which we live, and Zagreb was the capital of Croatia. And actually, it was the option, and it was only one school. It was the option to go there, and then very soon I became very nervous about kind of very traditional polytechnic education, which was exercised in Zagreb at that time. And then I start traveling a lot, especially to Scandinavia. So me and two of my friends, we worked during our studies rather than go for boring lectures, and we earned enough money to go to Scandinavia. And my father managed to buy a Golf 1 from Sarajevo, which was produced in Sarajevo at that time. And we traveled for 28 days. We did 10,000 kilometers. And then we really visited almost all most important buildings in Denmark, in Finland, in Norway. And that trip actually brought me really a lot into what could be architectural culture in a slightly different cultural setting in Scandinavia than in Balkans. So I then actually decided to work really as an architect. But when we've been still students, in a final year, we did a competition for the primary elementary school in Croatia. And we've been really, this was our first competition. But among 56 entries, we won the competition. We won the first prize. Our design was totally influenced by Cedric Price, which work I visited in London a year before, especially Interaction Center in a Kentish town in London. Of course, we couldn't believe it with such kind of take on architecture we could win, but it was very good jury, and we won. By winning the prize, we, as just graduated architects, had an opportunity to employ ourselves at the School of Architecture in Zagreb in an office. So that was an excellent, actually, system in a former Yugoslavia, that in one institution, which is like School of Architecture, you can work, you can teach, and you can do research, which I did after in the 80s. And this was a main moment, actually, in my relation to architectural world, where we tried to really build the first building. Building was never built. We worked for 2 years, and the situation in Yugoslavia really deteriorated a lot, and the budget for building such building was not available anymore. But this actually gave me opportunity to further study the let's say issues of education on a primary elementary level, and to do research about it. And then I figure out that I can apply as a researcher at the university for a scholarship to study abroad. And I applied to study with Aldo van Eyck and Herman Herzberger in Delft. And I was really lucky to win the scholarship within the Yugoslavia. And I, in 1983, first time I met Herman Herzberger and Aldo van Eyck in Delft. Yeah, that's a little complex question in my case, because I'm born in Yugoslavia, Croatia, Zagreb. I spent most of my professional life in the Netherlands. I lived 25 years in the Netherlands, 9 years maybe in Croatia, and now 8 years in US. And my mother was born in Chile, in South America. So when I go down there in Punta Arenas and Porvenir, they treat me as a Chilean because my grandfather was digging gold there and having a big business in like sheep and wool, 25,000 sheep apparently. So I have these 4 kind of national, let's say, backgrounds. But professionally, I'm primarily Dutch, or within a Dutch culture of education and architecture, which was really incredibly, how to say, important for me to meet Herzberger, to work with him in the 80s. And when he established the Berlach Institute in Amsterdam in 1990, he invited me to work with him and to, in parallel, work on my first book in Delft. And I never believed that such a kind of almost semi-utopian project of the Berlach Institute in terms of its origins would last for 22 years. But yes, it did. And I was from the day one almost to the last days at the Berlach. I don't know, I do a lot of lectures. I worked in, 40 countries all over the world with the Berlach and without the Berlach. And I needed to present myself, So I did a slide when we use slides. And one slide, I put 2 slides in. One is a plan of the Diocletian Palace in Split, and another is Mondrian Boogie Woogie. So this kind of, overlap of Mondrian Boogie Woogie, which is a sort of, let's say, Dutch genius in US, and me and my family coming from Dalmatia, from Split, from, if you wish, Roman culture, is what somehow defines maybe some sort of my DNA. Yugoslavia was a very interesting country. It was a kind of buffer zone between 2, cold world powers or influences. President Tito was a sort of geopolitical genius who, created this buffer zone. So we had completely different life and education and possibilities than our colleagues in a so-called Eastern Bloc or behind the Iron Curtain. School of Zagreb, or if we can call that, and yes, we can call that, has been really based on the very first modern architects which studied with Otto Wagner in Vienna, in Prague, in Berlin, in Paris, and has been really modernist. So the modernist tradition in Croatian architecture between 2 World War and after 2 World War, and even after Paolo Portoghese, postmodernist sort of presence to the Pans exhibition, has been a continuation of a modern project, right? Still today, now this project now is a little bit eclectic and looking maybe strange, because you really do not know, is this a villa from the 30s or from this century? But that was that school. Neven Šegvić and Božidar Rašica, two really great professors, intellectuals, architects, influenced my but only two of them, influenced my let's say development in Zagreb, and and open up to me, some sort of let's say idea, eagerness, and ambition to go further, to be more involved perhaps in Scandinavian or Italian or Dutch architectural discussions or productions. Obviously, we are talking about the digital world where you only have magazines, you have limited means of really knowing kind of things. And I do remember that I was once with my family in Portugal in 1983, and then Peter Eisenman was giving a lecture, and for the first time I meet Peter Eisenman, and I was impressed with Peter, because what he was saying, I didn't know a lot about it. So I needed to study, and it was a great opportunity to study in Delft with Hermann Herzberger in a very, very, I would say, non-hierarchical and almost slightly anarchistic situation, where I was able, more or less, with Hermann to just discuss about architecture, discuss about ideas, discuss. Van Eyck was still there as well, and learn a lot, right? So what I learned was 2.5 years in a library in Delft. Actually, that was very, very important. Here I understood who is Terragni, who is Christopher Alexander, who is, Christian Orbegl Schulz. We didn't have all of these, books in Yugoslavia, and I'm talking about 80s. Then, of course, I was not only reading the books in a library, I started working on my first book, which was then published as well in the beginning of the 90s, which was basically a book about relation between the children and the school environments and the influence of the space and architecture on the children, behavior and the development in educational settings. And that very first book was incredibly difficult for me to really, develop, to really do research, write in English, edit, published. But with a great help from Delft and Hermann, I managed, and that actually then somehow actually put me in a position in which I wasn't really returning anymore to Croatia, to my office with my partners, and has been offered the position of a course director at the Berlage with a full-time engagement. So I simply give up a practice, and has been by the proposal by Hermann and Ken Frampton, who was teaching at that time at the Berlage, become a kind of on a full-time or more than full-time basis, a sort of course director at the Berlage. In one way, that was incredibly, fantastic opportunity. In another way, yes, you are not in practice anymore, but you are in a proximity of all these incredible characters, which we've been able to bring at the Berlage, to run studios, to do master classes, to develop a very unique space, which I was then actually running in the last 5 years of the Berlage history, when it was sadly kind of terminated by the decision of the government in terms of austerity measures in culture, since we've been a cultural institute, not educational institute. That's important to say as well. Yeah, what I like in a Dutch culture, not only architectural culture, but let's talk about architectural culture and education, that it's very horizontal, right? So Herman is Herman, Rem is Rem, no one is the professor, no one is to be necessarily followed. And yes, of course, Herman was incredibly influential when I was doing research with him in the 80s. But when Rem and Ilya Zengelis moved from London to Rotterdam and established OMA in Rotterdam, they become very, very influential on the entire, scene in the Netherlands and globally, of course. However, Rem was incredibly critical on Van Eyck and Herzberger, while they've been, so important in the 80s. Herman decided almost immediately, to invite Rem to teach at the Berlage, or to do the masterclass, or to be associated with the Berlage. And this is exactly this positive aspect of a Dutch culture. If somebody is criticizing you even very, very, strongly, you continue conversation, you bring him in, and you talk. I remember when Herman wanted Zaha to come to do the masterclass at the Berlage, Zaha was not responding. She was really in a belief, oh look, Herman, Van Eyck, they're gonna eat me, they're gonna, this cannot be true that I'm invited. So Herman didn't know what to do, and he told me, Vedran, maybe, I say, Herman, yeah, maybe I can go to London, right? And I went to London. I told Zaha, look, I'm not Dutch, I'm from Balkans, and we can talk. And she liked immensely, excuse me, what actually we are doing at the Berlage, and how Berlage is kind of different, okay, slightly like AA, but not really. And since then, and then she came with Patrick to do the masterclass. At that time, Zaha would have 7 people in the office and no work at all. We are talking about 1992, and we remain in an incredibly good relation with her since, right? She coming more or less regularly, which would mean every 3-4 years in her case. But that was a kind of environment in which, the idea of the mentorship, or the idea of the influence on development of the young architects has been once discussed at the Berlage, and this very first generation there told Herman something like, Herman, we don't want to be taught, but we want to learn. And that became almost the mantra at the Berlage. Don't teach these people anything. They're already good. They're all architects, but they want to learn. So now comes a question, that you need to learn in an environment from somebody in relation to the briefs, research, history theory program, where, of course, Max Riselada, Rumor Fatorn, and Ken Frampton was fantastic. And that was this perhaps different take on education of architects at the Berlage, which was immensely appreciated by the participants. We didn't call them students. And if you look today, now I just did a lecture on Venice Biennale, and every second pavilion, every whatever second, presentation is somebody from the Berlage. So it's been these 250, 300 participants, which are now really influential all over the world, South America, Japan, Americas, and Europe. So what Herman was creating, and he was, I think, very conscious about it, he was creating a place as an antagonist subject to the very traditional and according to his opinion, wrong education in Delft and in Eindhoven, in 2 schools in the Netherlands. But ministry was conscious about that as well. That's why they've been funding Berlage. Again, this is only possible in the Netherlands in the 90s, that you have a national ministry who is basically supporting education of Japanese, Korean, Italian, German, or American students. This is a characteristics of the Dutch nation or spirit. We sail all over the world, we communicate with all over the world, and that was the model. Another model was a little bit Montessori model, since Herman is very much a Montessori person, of a kind of extended family, right? Of a family in which, yes, you have to, but the family where you tolerate different characters, right? And the differences. And that was what many people appreciated about the Berlage, that however badly or even non-speaking English our Asian students has been there, they've been completely embraced in a system, and after 2 years has been on a level of perfect, presentation of their work, because they are so talented, so industrious, so belonging strongly to the family. That was a bit of a concept as well. All right. Look, let's only talk, for example, on super sudakas, so to speak, which was kind of ironic, obviously, title of their little group when the Super Dutch book was published by Bart Lootsma. Yes, Manuel, Juan Pablo Corvalan, Anita Raskovsky, Sophie Saavedra, and many others, not to now forget anyone, has been really the best model what Herman believed should be the mission of the Berlage. Okay, guys, you come to Amsterdam, you stay here in a educational, cultural environment for 2 years, but then you go back home. You don't, continue living in Europe or continue living in Amsterdam. Some of them did, but most of them really go back home to change the status quo of these countries as much as they could, through education, through the work, through architecture, through engagement. And Super Sudakas, by organizing these workshops all over the South America, and actually by engaging in a practice, engaging in a production of a different architecture in South America, is an excellent example. And it is similar, really, in other countries. I was 2 years ago, before COVID, in Shenzhen, in Guangzhou, in China, and I'm doing a lecture, and then 12 of Chinese students now living in Shenzhen and Guangzhou is coming for my lecture, and I know all of them, and I'm so incredibly happy and even proud to see how well they are doing, right? Of course, they live in Chinese incredible economical miracles where there is a lot of work, but the work they produce and what they are, showing to me, like Yi Min, who's now one of the leading professors at the Guangzhou School of Architecture, is really what makes me extremely pleased that certain, cultural project invented by Hermann Herzberger, continued by Will Aretz, Alejandro Zaira Polo, and finally me, resulted in its original ideas. I did spend enormous amount of time with Talca people, because that was really unique experiment. But again, this is a school which curriculum, which accreditation, which everything has to be submitted to the national rules and regulations from the Ministry of Education, or whatever it is called in Chile. So nothing bad about that ultimately, but the kind of spirit which Berlage was promoting, right? Of course, it's a postgraduate education. is not really education of the people within whatever undergraduate, graduate program. has been somehow transgressed, transformed, and in a way used by many of our former students in developing such examples as perhaps Talca in Chile. When Hermann was doing Berlage, Hermann was professor in Delft. He was the first professor in Delft who was accepted by the revolutionary students of 1968 after they for 2 years ran university and nothing happened. So Hermann comes from, let's say, kind of anarchistic, perhaps revolutionary background. But Hermann was very interested to know what is happening at AA, what is happening at Städelschule in Frankfurt, what is happening at SciArc. He was a friend of Capi, original, Californian architects which established SciArc. He was very interested in alternative, let's say, advanced, however you want to call it, models of education in architecture, which is basically not polytechnic, right, like Delft or ETH Zurich. Interestingly enough, DRL at AA was developed by Brett Steele and Patrick Schumacher, and with Zaha's little bit mentorship, but they come to Berlage and discuss with us what you are guys doing, what's the model, and then they started DRL. IAC in Barcelona, again, Vicente Gallar and his partner coming to Berlage, again discussing with us, okay guys, what you are doing. They didn't copy, of course, but they wanted such sort of different institutions or institute to enter into the into the different way of educating or working with the young architects. So that was kind of I don't want to say movement, but in the 90s, Berlage, or on the end of the 90s, Berlage was a bit recognized internationally, and DRL was very successful, ITAC as well, and then what is happening now, perhaps, has been a bit of normalization or institutionalization of these places where they needed somehow to be accredited, to be within a system, and couldn't be outside of the system anymore. AA is now totally within RIBA, accreditation. Berlage is simply a very little program in Delft, which is accredited, and ITAC probably the same. So, so the kind of let's call it not anarchists, but alternative way of educating people and the way of working with the people seems not to be now there. I mean, I know for some initiatives for different new schools, but you do not see really results of these initiatives. And you see that all the new programs, all the new schools are more or less integrated within the bureaucratic systems of a particular countries. Right. Yeah. Today, I think that American academia is treating me well. No, it's not joke. It's serious. I like very much my American experience in education here at IIT. Of course, I've been previously in many reviews, and I'm still at SciArc or MIT or here at UIC in Chicago, and there is incredible kind of seriousness about educating young people to become architects in America. And when I say seriousness, I mean in terms of resources which this school are sort of employing in the creation of let's call it fundamentally substantial education. When I arrived here with a really kind of almost unbelievable coincidence, because Villaretz was calling me that we have to meet, and he was calling me that we have to meet when the Berlage was already kind of disappearing. And I say, Will, are you calling me to save Berlage? I say, no, you can't save Berlage because I live in Maastricht and all the ministers are my neighbors. So they told me, no, we can't save Berlage. It's a decision and it's austerity measures. You can't question that. However, at the time when they decided to terminate the Berlage as it was, with 150 letters all over the world that they should not do that, the F-16 Dutch army planes has been bombing Tripoli in an invasion of Libya. So I put one argument publicly that if we would stop only one flight of F-16 to Libya, we could save money for 10 new Berlaches. They didn't like perhaps this argument or hypothesis. Anyway, yeah, and then Will said, look, Vedran, we have to talk. Okay, we talk. I'm invited to Chicago. I said, Will, that's great. You go to Chicago, give a lecture, come back. No, Vedran, I'm not invited to Chicago to give a lecture. They want me to be a dean at IIT. I said, Will, how are you going to be a dean at IIT? You have one office in Amsterdam, you have another office in Berlin, you have another office in Zurich, you have 70 people employed. You know, Vedran, maybe I could be a dean if you go with me. I said, Will, wait a second, how I go with you? Anyway, that's our little anecdotal kind of conversation, which then become deadly serious when we really decided, Will and me, to go to IIT and to discuss with the provost, Alan Kremp, at that time, what they expect from us and why they are even inviting us. Okay, Will, very recognized, world-known architect, but they've been really inviting us because of the Berlage. They say, look, you guys put a kind of mark on world education, especially with Aret's incredible kind of insistence on bringing the best emerging American architects to the Berlage during his tenure, which has been, Jesse Reiser and Greg Lynn and Liz Diller and Stan Allen and Hani Rashid and Liz and Couture. So this generation of paperless studio, mainly, or others, has been, teaching at the Berlage on almost regular basis. Jeff Kipnis, Sanford Quinter, all of these generations been there. So Will established a bridge, a link, and when actually John Oakman published this 200 years of architectural education in Americas, the Berlage is the only school mentioned in this incredible publication because in an essay by Stan Allen, because about this bridge, this link which was established. Now suddenly we are using that bridge to go back to America, right? From the Netherlands, me and Will, and then trying to change actually radically a curriculum which was still a bit based on a Mies curriculum here at IIT. And I think for 5 years we did with incredible energy, enthusiasm, what is a kind of new curriculum or new idea of educating people at IIT, which still in a way is kind of existing at the moment, where perhaps some urban issues, some research issues, some ideas about working with third-party collaborators in every studio, being more open to the issues which are critical for the city of Chicago are still there. So these 5 years has been incredibly kind of active, with perhaps most important aspect was MCHEP, Miss Crown Hall America's Prize, which will put enormous amount of energy and resources in order to establish it, that finally, perhaps for the first time in this kind of relation between North and South America, MCHEP created a platform for discussion, for promotion, for, yes, awards, but awards not being that important. What was important that instead of money, we published the books about the winning architects in terms of emerging architect and the big award. And this is, I think, the most important, perhaps, legacy of what Arets and I did here in these first 5 years in our tenure. Now, me and Will are back to teaching, and we like a lot. There is a new, dean, new administration here, and I really like going back to teaching, because I was, yes, teaching at the Verlage and administrating here, but I wasn't really involved in these desk tutorials, immediate kind of relation with the students, and in a way I like it a lot, and I think that students are profiting as well, being in a relation with me in a studio. I'm director of the Master of Science program, and what we are developing as a kind of maybe change, not to say radical, is to address something what I was lecturing today about Venice Biennale, and this is that we live in a time of Anthropocene. And when we say Anthropocene, okay, what is this? It's geological era, but it's not only geological. It is actually to understand the conditions in which the production of social and urban realities are produced at the moment all over the world, and how we could position our discipline, our disciplinary knowledge and possibilities to deal with the anthropocentric impact on the world. That's one idea. Another idea is that we would like, in an MS program, I'm talking about MS program, but Anthropocene would cover as well the studio, what I'm doing, not necessarily other colleagues in an advanced studio program. But another idea is something what we call curatorial urbanism, so that we do have a bit of an inflation of biennales, triennales, architectural exhibitions, but every architectural exhibition at the moment is now curated with some form of research or another. And the question is, okay, if you curate, urbanism, not necessarily that you are doing exhibition, but that you are putting in front some curatorial argument in order to make a research, this would be the other aspect of the way in which Master of Science students could develop here at IIT. What is clear that we need more and more probably a knowledge from other disciplines as well, in order to substantiate our arguments, our research, our, work. It is not to say that every studio, every research has to be based on, I don't know, environmental studies or in economy or in sociology or in ideology or philosophy, as it used to be historically always related to some of those, and then architects would. No, I think that we primarily need to develop our discipline and our discourses. And when I say our discipline and our discourses, we are actually operating in all scales, really from a domestic scale to the almost planetary scale, with impact of, buildings on a climate and all of that. So once one operates through different scales, one probably needs to establish some sort of idea about the design. And here comes Herzberger's very simple sentence. To design means to think. Design is not making drawing without thinking. So question is now, okay, when you think in architecture, you need to create an idea, right? An idea about the building, an idea about the society, an idea which contributes to the development of our discipline, which then really contributes to the society and basically contributes to the civility, something which is public, something which is, common to all of the people. And these ideas of a new common, if you wish, are becoming very important, I think, today. Today in a world which seems to be divided on many, many, many fronts, right? And you may call that contribution to civilization, if you want really, to slightly monumentalize the architectural practice, research, and discourses. But yes, it is a civilized project of contributing to some sort of civilization. And are we the good ancestors is perhaps a question, nowadays. A lot of us. How we understand history, how we understand a colonial history, how we understand what we've been through with a series of dominant discourses which are now under the questions. And that's, to me, is as well, I would say, the beauty of architecture. Or what Brancy was quoting William Morris, architecture must produce some happiness. If you are designing something, you are working in architecture, it should be happiness. We maybe didn't see enough happiness in some of the biennales or in some of the recent, ideas about architecture. But this is not, of course, what Morris is talking about is not a kind of childish happiness. It's a happiness which is related to certain substantial ideas. Yeah, there is a little anecdotal story about MCEP, right? It's been Giovanna Carnevale, Italian woman, who actually come to Delft in my office and said, I'm Giovanna Carnevale, I'm a new director of Miss van der Rohe European Prize. Giovanna, how you are, new director? Just appointed. I say, great. And she said, but look, Vedran, you Berlage are in a advisory board of Miss van der Rohe European Prize. Yes, we are. But I heard that you are going to America. I said, yes, and most probably I'm with Arets going to America. She said, how about Miss America's Prize? I say, look, Giovanna, yes, I know about that. It used to be organized 1 year in the late 90s, but then died out. And perhaps it's a good idea. Let me talk to Will and we'll do something. So she wanted really a lot of kind of relation between European prize and American prize. That's not really possible. So we started here internally MCEP. MCEP Miss Crown Hall America's Prize has been discussed really with Steve Crown, the Crown family, who talked to Will many times, and it was his really idea. Okay, it was our idea, but his insistence that South America must be included immediately in a prize. We've been in the beginning thinking, look, it's so difficult to organize all of that, nominators, this and that. Yes, we asked Sasha Janko, who was working at the Verlache, on similar, similar projects, but he really insisted. Then Ken Frampton came in and said, this is an amazing idea. He was the first president of the jury. He said, finally, we should maybe not talk anymore east-west, but we talk north-south, meridian kind of exchange. So we've been really, really incredibly surprised with the answers from all the nominators for the quality of the work which was presented, with incredibly, really, I must say, quality of some works from South America, and establishing through the format of and the methodology, if you wish, of the prize, that jury is able to visit the buildings. The jury is talking not only to the architect but to the clients, that architects and the clients are coming here and discussing with all the students, all the faculty at IIT. So that was really, really, really amazing, which usually is not done by universities. It's done by, cultural institutions, I don't know, Art Institute or such kind of institutions. No, it is a school, it is a university which supports basically a cultural project. And then when you see the kind of appreciation, very much from the emerging offices in South America on MCHEP, and the possibility for these people to, of course, put that on Instagram, on web, on, and to kind of show their work around, that was, I think, very important for these people as well. Here in Canada and US and Mexico, obviously, in a similar way. But MCHEP really, in an extremely short time, less than 8 years, established itself as a very respected cultural, project, which is luckily going further with now the 4th cycle, which will basically, I think even increase a sort of visibility and potentially influence more, the discussions which we have so far. Young architects in South America have more opportunities. They can engage with competitions. They can engage with maybe private clients. They often have even family relations to build the first building. It's not case here, right? Here is still the major production of architecture in US is in a corporate, environment. Nothing against corporate offices, but then you look at the quality and then you see the difference, right? And in that sense, to support through MCHEP the emerging architects in US was very important, right? Not that they would tomorrow get a lot of commissions after being awarded or shortlisted for the prize, but that to signal these kind of situations and to compare them and to hopefully make a critical conclusions. If you look to the architecture in Germany, in Switzerland, that's all Europe, in Finland, it is based on open or closed architectural competition. And here, there are none or little or not really, right? So this is one kind of conclusion which was made in these discussions. In another way, when we talk to the clients, when we talk to the people who's been, here in North America, responsible for building, I don't know, Seattle Library or other public important buildings which we studied, we see a huge interest in a relation between the client and the architect, right? And sometimes incredibly, developed relationship. That's what I think is here more of a sort of way to do something good or different or advanced, where you have enlightened clients, and that's important here. I was once, talking to Ilya Zengilis, which I consider as the best educator ever, or at least in a time in which I was there. And Ilya was working with me like 70 years, for 70 years at the Berlage. And Ilya told me, look, Vedran, these people we work with, these participants, students, they will soon, become adult professionals and very, very probably important people. And you and I will remain children, or children-like. So it's hard to me to become an adult. So I would like to learn how, how to become really, and not to remain a child who still believes in maybe something almost romantic in terms of, exchange between the people, educating people, some form of humanity, some form of freedom of, institutional performance which enhance the freedom and the kind of development of the individuals. That's what I would like to maybe learn in a way in which I could be more adult to help children to become better adults. I in spite of being children-like character, perhaps, I put many lives in my life, right? I raised 5 children. I worked all over the world. I have multiple experiences. I really believed that I was extremely lucky and privileged, ultimately, right? I believe that, and I really do not miss anything, really. What I was originally thinking after winning this first competition, that I will be much more in practice, right? That I will really practice architect as an architect, right? I studied architecture, I won, I did a couple of buildings, of course, but that I would have more opportunity in this kind of aspect of an architect life or work. No, it didn't happen. Since 1995, I was, full scale into. I do not regret in any way, and I like all of my experiences. And what I like really that you somehow, why you are not really becoming an adult, because you constantly work with the new students, right? With the new young people. So yes, I have 5 children, so I work with them, but children are children, students are students. And when you are in a constant relation with the new generations, with the new students, you need somehow to become, to remain young, right? Or close to them in one way or another. So me now, and I was always somehow, previously, historically, I was always the youngest, especially in Yugoslavia. I was the first who published the book in English. I was the first who got a scholarship to go there. I was the first of this, of that, the youngest, right? Now I'm the oldest. In many situations, and now even here at IIT, okay, there are some older guys, but I'm like the oldest. And then you see, okay, good, but still you need to try, which I did just lecture today, to come close to the understanding of a new generations. So of course you are not rejuvenating yourself by doing that conceptually, but you try really hard to understand this new generation and to steer, to a bit influence their way of thinking in terms of design, in terms of research, in terms of what actually Martin Felsen as well was asking them, okay guys, look, this is a Vedran showing the Venice Biennale, but what do you think about that? Where do you stand in your position towards the world? So what you guys are doing, I think, is super interesting actually format by talking to 100+ people. The question is, of course, what you do out of it, book, web, this and that, to see what are the kind of, this is how I understand this interview, what are these individual histories of people being in, let's say, in relation to architecture. And I think that more and more we should be concerned about individual histories, in relation to the institutional responses, in relation to the to even governmental, policies, in relation to what is happening with the world, right? These relationships is what I think I was kind of probably dedicating my life to, or my kind of efforts in what we call education, which I never call education because it's already introduced a certain institutional relationships.